No data? No problem. With the lowest data rates in the country, have extra fun with SLT Extra GB.
For more details, call 1212.
Tonight, sour deal. Wheat flour price hike comes under criticism, but the industry points to losses.
We have come to a situation we cannot continue further on the current prices.
Journey planning made easy. Google Transit option switches on for Sri Lanka.
Goals out of this is attract more people to use the public transport.
48-hour token strike. The Central Mail Exchange comes to a standstill. Breaches are insignificant. EU goes soft on Iran over nuclear deal. All that and much more coming up on Fast at 9. This Tuesday, the 16th July 2019.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9.
මුහුණ සති කීපයකට කලින් Fair and Lovely men ගෑවට පස්සේ මාක්ස් අඩු වෙලා ෆෑනස් වැඩි වෙලා.
මාක්ස් අඩු කරලා ඔයාගේ ෆෑනස් ස්ටෑන්ඩඩ් එක වැඩි කරගන්න. Fair and Lovely men anti marks cream.
Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I'm Dhammika Kanaka. Let's start with your local stories. President Maithripala says that all those who are responsible for the controversial central bank bond scam have now been identified. Addressing an event in Palanda this afternoon, the head of state also said that he had personally spoken with the Singapore Prime Minister to extradite former central bank governor Arjuna Mahendran, who is one of the main suspects in connection with the incident. The president, however, went on to say that Mahendran is currently in hiding and that measures are underway to arrest him. The head of state was also insistent that investigations on the central bank bond scam are underway and that legal action will be carried out against those who are responsible. Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, meanwhile, heralds his intention to return Jaffna to its glory days when the peninsula was renowned for churning out generations with mathematical nous. Addressing an event in Chunnakam yesterday, the Premier said that he wants to make Jaffna a centre for information technology and the key to it lies in developing the education sector in the northern province.
Colombo and Jaffna were the leading educational districts of Sri Lanka. Today, Jaffna has fallen behind both the tsunami and a continuous war for 30 years. We have to develop Jaffna education. It's not easy because the core of what is called Jaffna teaching profession is no longer in Sri Lanka. So it will take us 10 years to build it up, as I said last year. So I think we have to have an overall plan. Both the provincial council and the national government has to work together, because I want this to be especially a centre for IT. And to be a centre for IET, actually we need maths. Jaffna, which was famous for maths in the 80s, have now dropped. We have to train more teachers. While in addition to the additional help that is given, we have a fair number of large programs in the education ministry. So the shortage of buildings and equipment is getting solved by the Langama Pasala, Hondama Pasala program. We are also now taking the next step of Suraksha, giving insurance to all, providing insurance for our students. More than that, we are now giving teachers, trained teachers or graduates. I am not taking untrained teachers, and all the teachers who are untrained have now been given a training, because our aim is 13 years of compulsory education. Then we want to take you on to the computer age. So we are starting the pilot program this year. It will be for students of year 12 and 13. The pilot programs are being started in national schools. Once as is settling down, then we want to take the provincial schools. So by next year, that should be open. And then to the rest of the schools, which means everyone will have computer education. And when 13 years of education start coming, you will virtually find doubling the numbers who are getting it. So I hope we will draw from this and ensure that sufficient development takes place in this area.
Now, price of wheat flour was increased by 8 rupees per kilogram from last midnight. The move, however, was not welcomed by several organizations, calling the price hike illegal and have threatened to take legal action. Speaking to First at 9, Head of Marketing and Communications of Serendip Flour Mills, Kalinga Wijayasekara said that they have no choice but to increase the prices, and the company has been running at a loss for more than 6 months.
Price of wheat flour saw 8 rupee increase from midnight yesterday. Accordingly, Prima Ceylon Private Limited is now selling a kilogram of wheat flour at 80 to 100 rupees per kilo. The company, however, did not provide a reason for the price increase. Meanwhile, Serendip Flour Mills has decided to increase the price of wheat flour by 7 rupees a kilo from midnight last night.
We have increased the wheat flour prices from last night by 7 rupees. This was primarily due to the increase of wheat prices in the world market. Also, as you know, the dollar has risen from 155 last year. Now it's trading at over 175. As you know, wheat is imported. For that reason, we are paying a huge price for imports of wheat. Serendip Flour Mills have been running at a loss for the last 6 months. So we have made representations to the government, Consumer Affairs Authority. We have provided all the documentation, and we have been in discussion with them for the last 6 months for a reasonable price increase. Actually speaking, 7 rupees is the bare minimum that we have taken. Actually speaking, we should have increased by at least 10 rupees to cover our losses. We have come to a situation we cannot continue further on the current prices.
The price increase was not welcomed by certain factions, with organizations such as the Foundation for People's Right Protection threatening to take legal action against the price hike. Meanwhile, highlighting a Gazette notification pertaining to the Consumer Affairs Authority Act, the National Movement for Consumer Protection made it evident that a kilogram of wheat flour can only be sold at 87 rupees, which is a stipulated price. In the meantime, the All Ceylon Bakery Owners Association said that a decision will be taken tomorrow on whether or not a price increase will be imposed on bakery goods. The price hike comes at a time when the central bank has said that some price pressures could emerge in global food commodity prices, which include essential items such as flour in the near term.
Former Secretary of Defense Hemasiri Fernando has given a 9-hour-long statement to the Criminal Investigation Department yesterday. Police media spokesperson SP Runa said that the statement was with regard to the terrorist attacks on Easter Sunday. Accordingly, the former Defence Secretary has recorded his statement with the CID from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. Inspector General of Police Puji Jayasundara, who is currently sent on compulsory leave, and former Defence Secretary Hemasiri Fernando were arrested recently over their failure to prevent the Easter attacks on Easter Sunday. They were, however, granted bail afterwards. Now, 290 detonators were found at a residence in Handigama of Piliyandala last evening. According to police, they acted on a tip-off by a suspect who was recently arrested for possessing 290 detonator cords at another residence close by. Acting on the information provided by the suspect, a joint operation was launched by the police and the army last evening, which led to the arrest of the owner of the house in Handigama, as well as his 2 sons. The arrested are currently being interrogated by the Piliyandala police, and a search operation is underway in search of another suspect from Kottadenyawa who is linked to the case. Now, in the meantime, the European Union has offered Sri Lanka support for its counter-terrorism initiative during talks held between the Sri Lankan government and visiting EU officials. A statement released by the EU delegation in Sri Lanka says that an informal counter-terrorism dialogue was held in Colombo between the visiting EU counter-terrorism coordinator Gilles de Kirchhoff, European External Action Service Head of Division for Counter-Terrorism John Gadruta, and Sri Lanka's Acting Secretary of Foreign Affairs Ahmed A. Jabad. It says that the EU presented a support package for Sri Lanka under the instrument Contributing to Stability and Peace to be implemented with the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime and United Nations Development Programme. The statement read that the package worth $9.58 million will notably focus on law enforcement, rehabilitation and disengagement, counter-narratives and online radicalisation. During discussions, Kirchhoff had underlined the EU's solidarity with Sri Lanka following the Easter Sunday terrorist attacks, which killed over 250 people. Common challenges relating to violent extremism and terrorism were also discussed, and experience regarding responses was shared. Moving on with other local stories, Turkish Ambassador in Sri Lanka, Tunja Oshkuhadar, warns that the Fethullahist terrorist organisation, which is commonly known as FATO, is now trying to re-establish itself in other countries after losing its stronghold in Turkey. Addressing the commemoration ceremony marking the third anniversary of the 2016 thwarted coup attempt in Turkey, the ambassador said that it has become a main priority of theirs to combat against FATO in and out of Turkey. The ambassador's statement comes in a backdrop where the Turkish embassy in Sri Lanka announced back in May that it had provided Sri Lankan authorities of details of FATO-affiliated members, schools and businesses in Sri Lanka over the last 4 years.
The third commemoration ceremony for the thwarted coup attempt in Turkey was held yesterday at the Turkish Embassy in Colombo. Prominent Sri Lankan parliamentarians, army officials and diplomats attended the ceremony.
It is crucial to note FATO's dark network, which started from schools and prep schools established over the last few decades. When they started the campaign by establishing schools in Turkey and later around the world, they disguised themselves as benign educational movement. This educational movement, in fact, brainwashed young minds at schools and indoctrinated a large group of radical followers who executed the instructions of their leadership without questioning and violating all legal and moral norms. Graduates of these schools were able to infiltrate into the most critical state institutions by stealing the exam questions. For the past 3 years, the combat against FATO within and outside of Turkey has been one of our main priorities. The organization, which lost its backbone in Turkey, is now trying to survive by making use of its structure in other countries. Turkey's efforts for fully eliminating the structures of FATO abroad constitutes a long-term fight. The Turkish government will resolutely maintain its efforts in that regard.
Following Easter Sunday attacks, the Turkish embassy in Sri Lanka made it public that its government had been working closely with Sri Lanka in the fight against all elements of international terrorism, especially against the Fethullahist terrorist organisation. The Turkish government banned the organisation in their country after discovering its terror activities in 2013. The embassy said that it had provided local authorities with details of the FATO-affiliated members, schools and businesses in Sri Lanka over the last 4 years and urged the Sri Lankan government to ban these schools as well as businesses and to deport their staff.
Now, China has urged Sri Lanka to be vigilant of external interferences, saying such interferences can never bring benefits, but only trouble, chaos and disasters. Chinese ambassador in Sri Lanka expressed these views in an article on Hong Kong riots on the day it marked the anniversary of its return to mainland China.
Chinese ambassador to Sri Lanka, Cheng Zhu-yuan, says that countries like China and Sri Lanka, who share a common history of being bullied and colonized by powers, should always remain vigilant in terms of external interference. The ambassador stressed that such interference can never bring benefits, but only trouble, chaos and disaster, while noting that China always adheres to independent and peaceful diplomatic policies. He also highlighted China will never interfere with others' internal affairs. The ambassador made these thoughts clear in an article published yesterday on the recent riots in Hong Kong when protesters stormed its legislative building on the 1st of July when Hong Kong marked the 22nd anniversary of its return to mainland China. The ambassador also said that comments made by British Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt are brazen. Hunt said that UK stands behind people in Hong Kong in defence of the freedoms that Britain negotiated for them, and the Hong Kong authorities must not use demonstrators' vandalism as a pretext for repression. He further stressed that China has resumed sovereignty over Hong Kong and the Chinese government started administering Hong Kong since 1997. The ambassador further noted that those external forces who, under the disguise of all self-boasting justice and human rights, are actually bullying other countries all the time while interfering with others' internal affairs, and countries like Sri Lanka should not allow them to do so.
An association dubbed Sri Lanka Jathika Ranaviru Balawega today requested opposition leader Mahinda Rajapaksa to nominate former Defence Secretary Gotabaya Rajapaksa as the presidential candidate in a bid to revive the country. The members of the association made the request at a meeting held at Carlton House today.
The association, dubbed Sri Lanka Jatika Ranaviru Balawegaya, which comprises of retired war heroes, met opposition leader Mahinda Rajapaksa at the Carlton House this morning.
මේ රට දැන් විනාශයකට පත් වෙමින් යනවා. මොකද දැන් නැවත යුද පිටියක් බවට පත් වෙලා. පිට රටේට ගැතිය වෙලා දැන් මේකේ ඉන්න රජයේ නායකයෝ. අපිට රණවිරුව විදියට බලාගෙන ඉන්න බෑ. ඒ නිසා සෞභාග්‍යමත් රටක් උදා කර දෙන්න ඔබතුමාගෙන් අපි ඉල්ලා සිටින මේ රණවිරුවත් සමග ඇවිල්ලා ඉදිරි මැතිවරණයට ගෝඨාභය රාජපක්ෂ මැතිතුමන් ඉදිරිපත් කරන්න ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ ප්‍රථම වරට රණවිරු ජනාධිපති කෙනෙක් කරනවාමයි අපි මේ රණවිරුව එකතු වෙනවා. ආමනේ අපි කිව්ව අරගෙන
In the meantime, opposition leader Mahinda Rajapaksa participated in an event to hand over 7 prosthetic legs to 7 war heroes in the Ampara district.
Now, President of the World Patriotic Lankan Forum, Indika Gunasekara, is of the view that the public must be made aware of a campaign at the United Nations Human Rights Council against war heroes of Sri Lanka. Speaking in Maithripala recently, Gunasekara said that public contribution is crucial to counter the issue on an international platform.
We were impatiently waiting for a good few years, since 2015, to find appropriate solutions from the present government. Instead, what we can find is growing extreme difficult conditions between people and the horrible government policies. The whole situation is going bad to worse. It has now become very important to educate the general public of this scenario. Even though we are fighting internationally, it is very crucial to get the contribution of the general public like you for this mission.
Traffic in Colombo has become an unpleasant experience and has been for some time. But with the launch of the Google Transit facility in Sri Lanka, there could well be some reprieve. It aims to drive people towards using more public transport, leaving their vehicles at home. The required data needed to introduce this facility was submitted to Google in line with the 25th anniversary of the National Transport Commission on the 12th of this month. In addition to live traffic updates for private transport and commuters, Google is now providing public transport data to Sri Lankans via the new feature.
The newly introduced Google Transit facility in the Google Maps feature is expected to assist the Sri Lankan public by providing necessary details regarding bus routes, train stations, railway routes, as well as other information related to public transportation. The feature will also contain information on the destination, time to reach the destination, and the transport mode available to reach the destination. The common commuter will easily be able to plan their trips using trains, private buses handled by the Western Province Passenger Transport Authority, and interprovincial long-distance buses which are handled by the NTC within the Western Province. On the application, trains would be marked in red and buses in blue, with provincial and interprovincial buses being denoted in green. First at 9 spoke to team leader of the project, Dr. Dimantha De Silva, on this revolutionary initiative.
Google Transit is a feature available in Google Maps. Up to now, what was given was how to use the road network. So what we have provided is alternatives a person can take by taking different modes through public transport. We would expect more of the tourists to use this facility and actually use more public transport. Goals out of this is attract more people to use the public transport. Up to now, because of lack of information, a lot of people might have moved out of public transport and would have started using their own private vehicles.
The facility would initially be made available for the Western Province and would later be expanded across other provinces as well.
The Southern Provincial Authority actually started in simultaneously coding this data for their province, but it has not been released, and I hope that it's going to be released pretty soon. But for all the other provinces, we will have to code this information in, which will then give us the full benefit to the end user. Once all the buses and the trains are equipped with GPS, we can enable the real-time information and provide the real-time arrival time and departure times of each of the buses at each stop. So that is a feature that we can add on later on. Goal is that to kind of enable it for the whole country and also to move towards providing real-time information.
More local news await on the other side of this break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching First at 9. Here are some more local stories. Now, the South Asia Regional Consortium Centre for Combating Tobacco was unveiled yesterday in Colombo. The event was held with the participation of leading tobacco control advocates from around the world, with the intention of establishing a regional consortium to monitor tobacco industry activities.
In Sri Lanka, for example, since tobacco advertising, promotions and sponsorships are banned, that does not mean that the tobacco industry is not conducting marketing activities. It is. Those activities are focused at the retailers level. So you can ask the industry to provide details on how much it is spending and what type of marketing activities is it actually conducting and what are the incentives that are being given to the retailers. It has simply shifted to a different platform, and social media seems to be top on its agenda at the moment. The tobacco industry likes to enter into agreements and MOUs with governments simply because they are difficult to track and also to monitor. You can have the tobacco control law and insert some clauses pertaining to Article 5.3 in the tobacco control law, denormalizing the tobacco industry to the extent possible to regulate so-called socially responsible or corporate social responsibility activities that the industry is increasingly conducting across many countries in the world, including here in Sri Lanka. Banning tobacco-related CSR activities is going to be important to protect high-ranking government officials from being targeted by the industry.
The more effective tobacco control is, the less profit the tobacco industry makes. You know, we know kind of what the industry is going to say and do with very small changes. Every time you're proposing taxation increase, they're going to bring up the problems that they have with the economic impact. They're going to bring up how much taxes they already pay. They're going to bring up the disruption in the market. And that is why it's so important that partnerships such as the one being launched today be created, that networks be strengthened so we can share information. This is a quote from a report that was published in the year 2000, right when the Framework Convention was being negotiated, really demonstrating that the industry was really trying to convince the World Health Organization that tobacco was not a public health issue. Don't worry about that. That's something for rich countries only. Tobacco is not a problem for the WHO to address. Nothing that they do is haphazard. It's all planned.
Postal workers at the Central Mail Exchange have resorted to a 48-hour token strike action which commenced earlier this evening. The president of the Postal Services Union, Jagat Mahinda, stated that the strike was launched owing to issues related to recruitment, promotions and salaries. He went on to say that postal workers would resort to continuous strike if the government does not provide solutions to their demands. Now, Vice-Chancellor of the University of Runa, Senior Professor Sujiva Amarasena, confirms that 3 faculties of the university located at the Vellamadama complex will be reopened tomorrow. Accordingly, faculties of Science, Fisheries, Marine Science and Technology and Graduate Studies will be reopened for academic activities. The University of Runa was closed indefinitely on the 10th due to a clash between the Students' Union and the non-academic staff, which had happened the day before. It was reported that 10 university students, a non-academic staff member and a security officer who had sustained injuries during the incident were admitted to the Mathura General Hospital. The security at the university premises was also beefed up owing to the situation. Facebook's planned Libra cryptocurrency faced further objections when the US Treasury Secretary warned about its potential criminal use. He told a press conference yesterday that it could be used by money launderers and terrorist financiers and said it was a matter of national security. Facebook executives are due to appear before a congressional committee today. David Marcus, who will oversee Libra, is expected to tell the Senate Banking Committee that Facebook will not launch the currency until regulatory concerns are addressed. Now, in the meantime, oil prices steadied today as resumptions of output in the Gulf of Mexico after Hurricane Barry and a boom in US supply due to shale oil continued or countered tensions in the Middle East. Prices remained under pressure as data yesterday showed that second quarter economic growth in China slowed to 6.2% from a year earlier, the weakest pace in at least 27 years. Brent crude futures were up 4 cents at $66.52 a barrel. The international benchmark lost 24 cents yesterday. Meanwhile, West Texas Intermediate crude futures rose by 1 cent to $59.59 a barrel. US benchmark fell about 1% in the previous session. We take a look at news from overseas when we come back. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching First at 9. Now, the European Union does not believe that Iran's breach of the nuclear deal amounts to anything significant. Addressing a media briefing, EU's foreign policy chief said the bloc therefore will not invoke the dispute mechanism. Iran has broken restrictions on its production of enriched uranium in response to sanctions reinstated and tightened by the United States.
The mechanism that is foreseen in the agreement in case of significant non-compliance. For the time being, none of the parties to the agreement has signaled their intention to invoke this article, which means that none of them is, for the moment, for the time being, with the current data we have had, in particular from the IAEA, that the non-compliance is considered to be a significant non-compliance.
In the meantime, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu condemned the European Union's response to Iran's breaches of nuclear limitations, saying it recalled failed diplomacy with Nazi Germany ahead of World War II. Netanyahu has often cast Iran's nuclear projects as a mortal menace to Israel and the wider world. Although the United States quit the Iran nuclear deal last year, deeming it insufficient, Russia, China, France, Britain and Germany are still parties to the deal. Israel wants European powers join Washington in reimposing sanctions on Tehran, saying it could prompt the Iranians to enter talks on a more limiting nuclear accord.
President of the Philippines, Rodrigo Duterte, has signed a new law criminalizing catcalling, wolf whistling and other forms of public sexual harassment. Under the newly publicized Safe Spaces Act, gender-based sexual harassment is banned in all public places, including streets, workplaces, recreational areas and public vehicles. Listed offences include groping, stalking, flashing and making misogynistic, transphobic, homophobic or sexist slurs. The law also covers gender-based sexual harassment online, including physical, psychological and emotional threats made either publicly or via private messages. Now, Pakistan has fully reopened its airspace to civilian flights nearly 5 months after it was closed following a standoff with India. The closure forced international airlines to reroute around Pakistan and cost them tens of millions of dollars. State-owned carrier Air India and other Indian airlines were worst hit. Pakistan shut its airspace in February after India carried out an airstrike against what it said was a terrorist training camp in Pakistani territory. And that's it from all of us here at First at 9. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.